The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon, slipped beneath Nia Thompson's apartment door as gently as if it already knew it carried trouble. She noticed it only after kicking it by accident while taking off her shoes. At first she ignored it. Bills usually announced themselves loudly with red stamps and sharp corners. This one was different, cream-colored, thick and careful. Nia picked it up, her name written in handwriting she had once memorized without trying. Daniel Wright. Her chest tightened, not with anger but with something heavier. Memory. She sat on the edge of her couch and stared at the envelope longer than necessary. 3 years had passed since Daniel walked out of her life with promises that sounded sincere but never came back fulfilled. 3 years since she learned that love, when uneven, could quietly drain you dry. When she finally opened the envelope, her hands were steady, but her heart was not. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Daniel Wright and Emily Carter. The words blurred for a moment. Nia laughed softly, not because it was funny but because it felt unreal. Of all the things life could send her, this felt oddly intentional. An invitation to witness the future she was once promised, now belonging to someone else. She leaned back and let out a slow breath. She told herself she was over it. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece, new job, new routines, new strength. And yet, the thought of walking into that room alone, facing familiar faces and silent judgments, made her stomach knot. That evening, Nia went to her usual cafe after work, a small place where the lights were warm and nobody asked questions. She sat by the window watching people pass, wondering why healing didn't mean forgetting. As she stood to leave, she bumped into someone entering, her shoulder brushing his arm. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. The man smiled, calm and gentle, as if nothing in the world rushed him. "It's okay," he replied. There was something grounding about his voice. They exchanged only a few words, nothing important. But as Nia stepped back into the street, she realized something strange had happened. For the first time since opening that envelope, her heart didn't feel so loud. And she had no idea that this small moment would soon change everything she thought she knew about love, timing, and forever. The next morning, Nia convinced herself that the stranger from the cafe meant nothing. People crossed paths every day, exchanged polite words, and disappeared back into their own lives. That was how the world worked. Still, as she tied her hair and prepared for work, his calm voice returned to her thoughts without permission. By lunchtime the cafe was busy. Orders stacked up, cups clinked, and the usual hum of conversation filled the space. Nia focused on moving fast, keeping her mind occupied. She told herself that staying busy was the same as staying healed. Then she heard the door open. She didn't look up right away, but something about the energy in the room shifted. Slower, steadier. When she finally glanced toward the counter, her breath paused. It was him. The stranger stood patiently in line, hands in his coat pockets, eyes taking in the room as if he appreciated small details most people ignored. When their eyes met, recognition passed between them like a quiet greeting. "Hi," he said when it was his turn, his smile polite but warm. "We met yesterday." "Yes," Nia replied, surprised that he remembered. Yes, we did." He ordered simply and waited while she prepared his drink. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt easy. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed, and Nia felt an unexpected sense of calm. "I'm Joon-seok," he said after a moment. "Park Joon-seok." Nia Thompson." He nodded, as if committing her name to memory. "You seemed sad yesterday," he said gently, not accusing, just observant. "I hope today is better." Nia hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers noticing things like that. "Some days are heavier than others," she replied honestly. He smiled, understanding without asking for details. Instead of leaving, he took a seat at a nearby table. Over the next few minutes, small conversations unfolded, about coffee, about the weather, about how quiet moments were often the loudest. Before leaving, Joon-seok stood and thanked her again. Then, as if choosing his words carefully, he said, "If you ever need someone to listen, sometimes it helps when it's someone who doesn't already know your story." Nia watched him walk away, her heart confused but lighter. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning, not of rescue but of something rare. A connection built not from need but from choice. The wedding invitation stayed on Nia's kitchen table for days, unmoved, as if waiting for her to decide its fate. Every time she passed it, she felt the same tight pull in her chest. She told herself she didn't need to go. Closure didn't require an audience. Yet something about being invited made walking away feel unfinished. That afternoon, the cafe was quieter than usual. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting soft shapes across the floor. Nia wiped the counter slowly, lost in thought, when a familiar calm presence entered the room. Joon-seok. This time she smiled first. Back again? She asked, trying to sound casual. I was hoping you'd be here, he replied honestly. He ordered the same drink as before and took his usual seat. There was comfort in the routine already forming between them. As the minutes passed, Nia found herself talking more than she planned to. She mentioned the invitation without naming names, explaining how being asked to attend her ex's wedding made her feel small, as if her progress might disappear the moment she stepped into that room. Joon-seok listened without interrupting. When she finished, he didn't rush to respond. Sometimes, he said carefully, facing something doesn't mean you still belong to it. It just means you've grown beyond it. His words stayed with her. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him, her heart beating faster, not from fear but from impulse. This might sound strange, she began, stopping herself halfway. She laughed nervously. Actually, it will sound strange. He waited. Would you be my date to the wedding? She asked quietly. Just so I don't walk in alone. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Joon-seok blinked once, surprised, but not uncomfortable. He studied her face not as a billionaire or a stranger, but as a man deciding whether to show up for someone who had trusted him. Yes, he said simply. Nia stared at him. Yes. Yes, he repeated. If that helps you stand a little taller, I'll go. Relief washed over her, followed by disbelief. She smiled, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes. As Joon-seok stood to leave, he added softly, You won't be alone. And for the first time since the invitation arrived, Nia believed that. Agreeing to attend the wedding was one thing. Preparing for it together was something else entirely. Over the next few days, Nia found herself stepping into moments she hadn't planned for, quiet walks, shared meals, and conversations that stretched longer than time allowed. They didn't call them dates. There was no pressure to name what was happening. Joon-seok simply showed up when he said he would, and that consistency felt unfamiliar in the best way. One afternoon they walked through a small outdoor market near the cafe. Nia pointed out stalls she liked, laughing when Joon-seok struggled to choose between two pastries. The sound surprised her. It had been a while since laughter came so easily. As they sat on a bench, Joon-seok spoke about growing up in a household where success was expected and feelings were optional. He shared how people often admired his achievements but rarely asked how he was doing. Nia listened, offering quiet understanding instead of advice. It must feel lonely, she said. He nodded. It is. But it doesn't have to be. That evening they talked about the wedding itself, what to wear, how long to stay, where to sit. Nia admitted she was still afraid. Joon-seok didn't dismiss it. He simply reached out and hugged her, steady and warm, like an anchor instead of a shield. The hug lingered just long enough to feel safe. Thank you, she whispered. For trusting me, he replied. As days passed, Nia noticed something changing inside her. She wasn't rehearsing conversations with her ex anymore. She wasn't imagining judgmental stares. Instead, she found herself thinking about how Joon-seok noticed small things, how she liked her tea, how she paused before speaking when emotions ran deep. By the time the wedding day drew closer, Nia realized something important. This wasn't about proving anything to her past. It was about discovering that her present could be gentler than she ever expected. And whatever waited at the wedding, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Nia learned the truth by accident, the way life often reveals things when you're not looking for them. It happened on a quiet evening when the cafe television played a muted business segment in the background. She wasn't paying attention until she noticed a familiar face on the screen. Park Joon-seok. She froze, cloth still in her hand, as the reporter spoke about a powerful Korean CEO expanding global investments. The name, the face, the calm expression. It was him. The same man who laughed over pastries and walked beside her without ever mentioning status or success. Her first reaction wasn't excitement. It was confusion. Later that evening, when Joon-seok arrived as planned, Nia didn't bring it up right away. They sat in comfortable silence until she finally asked, Is there something you haven't told me? He didn't pretend not to understand. He nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd hear it from me, not a screen. He explained without pride or apology. His company, his responsibilities, the life that followed him everywhere. He spoke of meetings and expectations, but also of how lonely it felt when people approached him with assumptions instead of sincerity. I didn't want that to come between us, he said. I wanted to be just Joon-seok with you. Nia absorbed his words, then did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and hugged him. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because he looked relieved and tired all at once. I see you, she said softly. And I'm glad you didn't lead with that. Joon-seok closed his eyes briefly, holding the hug like it was something fragile and rare. In that moment, Nia understood something important. He wasn't offering her escape or rescue. He was offering presence. As they pulled apart, he looked at her carefully. "If this changes anything, I'll understand." "It does," she replied honestly. "It changes how much I respect you." The wedding was only days away now. And as the truth settled between them, so did something deeper. Trust. The wedding day arrived dressed in sunlight and quiet nerves. Nia stood in front of her mirror longer than usual, adjusting small details that didn't truly matter. What mattered was the feeling in her chest, steady but alert. This day had once symbolized loss. Now it felt like a final step forward. When Joon-seok arrived, he didn't rush her. He simply waited, offering a calm smile that reminded her she didn't have to perform or impress. As they walked toward the venue together, Nia noticed how his presence softened her thoughts. She wasn't bracing herself anymore. Inside, the room shimmered with celebration. Conversations paused as people turned to look. Nia felt the shift immediately, the whispers, the curiosity, the recognition that followed Joon-seok like a shadow. But he didn't acknowledge any of it. His attention stayed with her. Daniel noticed them too. For a brief moment, old memories threatened to surface. But then Joon-seok leaned slightly closer and asked, "Are you okay?" Nia nodded. And for the first time she meant it. They took their seats among guests who tried, and failed, to hide their interest. Nia felt taller not because of who sat beside her but because she felt chosen. Not as a statement but as a person. When Daniel finally approached, his smile faltered. He offered polite words but confusion lingered in his eyes. Nia responded calmly without explanation or defense. She didn't owe him that anymore. Throughout the ceremony, Joon-seok stayed attentive. When nerves crept in, he offered a reassuring squeeze of her hand. When emotions surfaced, he leaned in just enough to remind her she was safe. The wedding continued as planned. Vows were spoken. Applause followed. And Nia realized something quietly powerful. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to let go. The ceremony ended, and the room shifted into celebration. Music played softly as guests stood, laughing and moving toward the reception area. Nia rose from her seat with a calm she didn't expect. She thought the hardest part was over. She was wrong. Daniel found her near the edge of the room, holding a glass of water and breathing in the quiet space she had claimed for herself. His smile was careful, practiced like someone approaching a fragile memory. "You look different," he said. Nia met his eyes without flinching. "So do you." For a moment, neither spoke. The past stood between them, heavy but fading. Daniel glanced briefly toward Joon-seok, who was speaking with another guest nearby, then back at Nia. "I didn't think you'd come," Daniel admitted. "And I definitely didn't expect you to come with someone like him." Nia felt no need to explain. "Life surprises us," she said simply. Daniel sighed. "I made mistakes," he continued, lowering his voice. "Seeing you today, it made me realize that." Before Nia could respond, Joon-seok stepped closer, not invading the conversation, just present. He didn't interrupt or raise his voice. He placed a gentle hand on Nia's shoulder, grounding her. "We should join the others," Joon-seok said calmly. Daniel nodded, understanding the quiet boundary being set. There was no argument, no dramatic moment. Just clarity. As they walked away, Nia felt something loosen inside her chest. The conversation hadn't reopened wounds. It had closed them. Later, as they stood beneath soft lights outside the venue, Nia let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said. "For not speaking for me. For letting me stand on my own." Joon-seok smiled. "You were always strong. I just stood nearby." She hugged him then, firm, grateful and full of relief. And in that embrace, Nia knew the past no longer had a voice in her future. As the evening deepened, guests began drifting toward the reception hall, laughter echoing softly across the open space. Joon-seok checked the time, aware of his schedule and the long flight waiting for him the next morning. He had planned to stay just long enough to support Nia, then quietly leave without drawing attention. "I should probably go soon," he said gently, not wanting to break the calm between them. Nia nodded, understanding. She was grateful he had come at all. "You've already done more than enough." They walked back toward the main hall together, intending to say their goodbyes. That was when the officiant's voice filled the room again, calling everyone to settle for the vows. Guests moved quickly to their seats. The moment arrived faster than expected. Joon-seok hesitated. He glanced at Nia and noticed the change in her expression. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness but with reflection. This was it, the final page of a chapter she had carried for too long. "Are you okay?" he asked. She swallowed and nodded. "I think I need to stay." Just for this, without another word, Joon-seok took the seat beside her again. As the vows began, Nia listened carefully. Not with longing but with understanding. Each promise felt like a quiet goodbye to the version of herself who once waited for someone who couldn't stay. Her shoulders trembled slightly and Joon-seok offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. "You stayed." When the vows ended and applause filled the room, Nia felt lighter, as though something heavy had finally been set down. She leaned toward him and whispered, "Thank you for staying." "I wasn't ready to leave," he replied softly. In that moment, Nia realized the importance of what had just happened. He hadn't stayed out of obligation or politeness. He stayed because he wanted to. And that choice meant more than any grand gesture ever could. The reception slowly thinned as the night grew quieter. Lights dimmed, laughter softened, and the air felt calmer, as if the celebration itself was winding down. Nia stepped outside to breathe, the cool night air wrapping gently around her. She felt lighter than she had in years, yet unsure of what came next. Joon-seok joined her a moment later. They stood side by side beneath the open sky, neither rushing to speak. The silence between them felt full, not empty. "I thought tonight would be the end of this," Nia said softly. "You helping me face something difficult, then we'd go back to our separate lives." He nodded. "I thought so too." She turned to face him. "But it doesn't feel like an ending." Joon-seok took a slow breath, choosing honesty over caution. "What started as a favor became something I didn't expect," he said. "Being with you felt real, peaceful. And I don't want to pretend I didn't feel that." Nia's heart beat faster, not with fear but with recognition. "I felt it too," she admitted. "You showed up when you didn't have to. You stayed when leaving would have been easier." He smiled, small but sincere. "Would you like to see where this could go? Without pressure. Without rushing." Instead of answering with words, Nia stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was steady, full of gratitude and trust. "I'd like that," she said quietly. They stood there a little longer, the noise of the wedding fading behind them. Nothing had been promised yet, but something had been chosen. Not a past rewritten. A future just beginning. Months passed quietly, each day building something steady and unshakable between Nia and Joon-seok. There were no grand announcements or dramatic gestures. Just the slow rhythm of two people learning to live alongside one another, trusting and choosing each other each day. They shared mornings over coffee, laughter spilling over small mistakes and silly stories. Evenings were filled with walks in the park, hands brushing, sometimes clasping, always grounding each other. Hugs became a language of their own, comforting, warm, and unspoken expressions of care and devotion. Nia often thought back to the wedding, the moment when Joon-seok stayed for the vows. It had been a quiet choice, almost invisible to anyone else, but it had meant everything to her. That simple act had shown her that love could be patient, gentle, and loyal. One Saturday afternoon, they sat together on the balcony of Joon-seok's apartment, watching the city breathe under the golden sun. Nia leaned into him, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "I never imagined life could feel this calm," she said. Joon-seok wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Calm is something we earn," he replied softly. "By being honest, by trusting, and by choosing each other." Nia smiled, pressing a hand against his chest. "I choose you," she whispered, not for the first time, but with the same certainty she had felt that night at the wedding. He smiled down at her, tilting her chin up gently so their eyes met. "And I choose you," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering. There was no need for fireworks or declarations. Their forever started quietly, in the moments that mattered most. Morning coffees, evening walks, and the steady presence of someone who truly saw them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, Nia and Joon-seok stayed wrapped in each other's embrace. It wasn't the grand ending of a story, it was the calm beginning of everything they would build together. They didn't need the world to notice. They had each other, and that was enough.